All right, if you're anything like me, you hate running out of food on a trip. It's like a big fear, and so I'm a big fan of snacks during an adventure, and one of my absolute favorite go-to snacks are wonderful pistachios. You may be familiar with pistachios and the brand Wonderful Pistachios, but if you're not, they are one of the highest protein nuts out there. 1 ounce serving of Wonderful Pistachios is 6 grams of protein. That's 10% of your daily value. It also includes 9 essential amino acids, and they come with a ton of different flavors, varieties. There's a spicy version, there's lightly salted, there's no salted, there's so many, and every time I go on an adventure, I'm not even lying, I take an entire bag with me. And what's cool too, I love having the Wonderful Pistachio in shell, because then that almost gives me something to do and focus on as I'm paddling or biking through the really monotonous parts of the adventure. Every great adventure is going to have plenty of boring moments, and it's nice to have something to do and also something that is giving you some fuel, like Wonderful Pistachios. So they're one of my favorite adventure snacks, favorite road trip snacks, and definitely leave me feeling better than a lot of other snacks you can turn to. So if you want to learn more about how to fuel your next adventure with Wonderful Pistachios, go to wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So, one of the stereotypes when you get older, you start really getting into birds, and it is very true for me. My wife and I are like, is that a cardinal? Is that a mockingbird? A blue jay, whatever it is, I'm really getting into birds. And what I'm very excited about is the new Feather Snap, which is a Wi-Fi enabled smart bird feeder that blends the best of technology and nature. It's this unique dual bird feeder that helps attract more species with built-in solar panels and keeps your camera battery going strong to charge the camera that's on there, and then it sends it to your phone and also identifies the birds that are going to your feeder. Me and the kids are absolutely loving it, and we've been really surprised by what's come to our bird feeder. Just for transparency, I got my mom a trail camera last year so she could see all the animals in her backyard, and the first night we saw a bear. A bear. We didn't even know there were bears. I mean, we knew, but we didn't know they were that close. And this takes it to a whole nother level because it's for people who love birds and want to understand what's in their backyard. And I think it's an awesome gift idea. It's like one of those things a lot of people wouldn't get for themselves, but it's such a cool thing to give people that they can really get excited about. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And it's just, I'm always a huge fan of bringing more of nature in and getting people more excited about the things around them. And as someone who can't be in the mountains all the time or out on an adventure, this is almost like bringing a little adventure home with you. If you want to learn more about the Feather Snap camera, go to feathersnapcam.com. That's feathersnap, S-N-A-P, cam, C-A-M.com, where you can learn more about their cameras and open up your own window to the wild. I live in the incredibly hot Florida sun, and I end up going with a lot of friends to paddle and bike and hike, and it is hugely dehydrating. And it is so important to have very convenient and accessible hydration options, something more than water, which is why I'm a huge fan of Liquid IV. It is so easy, it's convenient to tear, open one of their packets, pour it into my water, shake it up, and enjoy it, and know that I am getting what I need for fast hydration. It tastes better than just water by itself. And like I said, incredibly lightweight. It has some pretty fun flavors like popsicle firecracker and rainbow sherbet. I know hydration is important for any adventure, not just when you're in somewhere hot, but anytime you're sweating, that needs to be an essential part of your adventure planning process. So if you want to add Liquid IV to your adventure equipment and make sure you stay hydrated on your next adventure, go to liquidiv.com and use the code ASP at checkout for 20% off your very first order of Liquid IV. Again, 20% off your first order for better hydration. Go to liquidiv.com and use the code ASP at checkout. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason. Getting this week's episode up just a hair late. I was out of town this weekend and life's busy, but we getting it up. This episode is awesome. Dion Leonard has an incredible story. You might be thinking, what does Finding Gobi mean? Well, It all starts with him as a kid in kind of the outback of Australia, small town, not really doing anything with his life, and making a bet at a bar that changed his life forever. Not only did he get in great shape and start running, which you'll hear more about that story. I'm leaving out details so that he can tell it. As he advanced in running and started running around the world doing ultras, he came across a stray dog, and that dog is named Gobi. And we are going to hear the story about finding Gobi. It is full of twists and turns, full of adventure, full of... It's a movie. In fact, it's probably going to be a movie here soon. More on that as well. But this story is nothing short of epic, and Dion tells it in such a great way. We only get into so much of the story in an hour. There's only so much we can cover. So if you are interested in reading Dion's highly popular and really well-selling book, Finding Gobi, we're going to be giving away one copy of that book today. And all you need to do is reach out to me, Instagram, email, mason@adventuresportspodcast.com, Instagram, Adventure Sports Podcast, and just say, hey, I want to find Gobi. If you do that in the next 48 hours, I will enter you into a pool of people, and we will randomly select a winner to receive a free copy of Finding Gobi. So if this interests you, let me know. There's a good chance you're going to win, and you get to get inspired by this incredible adventure that you're about to hear about. Dion, thank you so much for joining us. He's coming from the great state of Alaska today. Let's dive in. All right, folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today, we are featuring a story and featuring dogs. Who doesn't love dogs, and who doesn't love dogs on adventures? And today we're talking to Gobi's owner, partner, I don't know how dad, Dion. Welcome to the show, Dion Leonard. How you doing?
Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, usually I'm called Gobi's dad. That's pretty cool with me to be called that. So I've been called worse over the years.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I asked you where you're coming from, and that you're in Alaska right now exploring. And I did peep at your Instagram a little bit, and your partner as well, who I'm familiar with, who we were talking about. I think we sent you some beer. My day job's with Athletic Brewing, and I think I sent y'all some beer, or I'm going to coming up at one of your speaking engagements in Anchorage or Fairbanks. And so the world, she mentioned, hey, by the way, my husband is has this amazing book, and I looked in the story. I'm like, I have seen this. We got to get you on the podcast. So small world, man. It really cool to have this all connected. So that's usually my first question is where you're coming from, but we know where that is today.
Yep, beautiful Alaska, and you did send up some beer, and it was well received by the punters at an event that we had in outside of Anchorage in Wasilla. So yeah, that's actually not the first time. We've done a few events and we've used the beer, and we're big fans of the beer, of course, as well. So yeah, great. Thanks for the support. Appreciate it.
Well, where's home normally for you?
We do live in the US. We've been here about the last 5 years. We don't really have a fixed address. We're very transient with what we do, sharing the story of finding Gobi, which is, of course, probably what we'll be talking about today. And yeah, it takes us all throughout the US. So this is actually the 34th state we've traveled to in the last 5 years. So yeah, we've kept ourselves pretty busy.
What have you learned about the US in all that exploration?
Well, we've been here through it all, presidential races, COVID. I don't know. We brought all of these things over with us, but yeah, it's certainly been, an amazing 5 years just in terms of generally getting out and spending time in the country, meeting people. We've met some amazing people as well. But yeah, there's also been some challenges along the way, as there is with any sort of move. It was a big move from us to come over here, and then COVID came. So yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster journey, but we're enjoying every minute of it.
It's a beautiful place, wonderful place, but yeah, crazy 5 years you've been here. But let's dial it back. This is, I don't think you were planning on writing a book like this, having this kind of story. Maybe years ago when you were looking at your life in the future. No one really plans on these kinds of situations happening. So what was life like before all this? What was Dion like before meeting Gobi, before getting into this running? Where were you? What were you doing? What was kind of your outlook?
Well, that's a good question because it's also a long answer in some ways, and I guess it's really important to take sort of listeners back to where I'm from. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm from Australia. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Australia, in a very small country town, very small population, and had a very difficult, depressive, destructive childhood. The man that I thought was my father died the day after my 9th birthday, and it really sent our family life into disrepair. So my mother really struggled to cope with, of course, losing her partner. And we were then suddenly, my mum wasn't working. She needed to get a job. She was trying to put myself and my sister through school. Like, life became difficult. Many different sort of events sort of happened throughout the next couple of years, and our family life would implode basically. And that was really the sort of start of what would become my life. And at the age of 13, going on 14, I'm basically on the streets of that same small country town, working in a gas station, trying to put myself through school. And as you could imagine, like, the struggle is real. Like, we didn't have any other family support. There was no help or assistance from anyone. This is, I was born in 75, so you're talking early 80s in Australia. And Australia is a completely different place now. There's a lot more money in Australia. There's a lot more economic benefits and a lot more happening there than what was happening when I grew up. So, yeah, life was a struggle. And I was trying to put myself through school. I had a very tough time at school, trying to get to school, trying to, concentrate on studies. So I ended up leaving school with a pretty average education. And the only thing that you could do in this small country town where I lived after school was go and work in a meat factory, like a slaughterhouse, an abattoir. And that's what I did for the next 3 years. And my life was going nowhere, and it was going nowhere pretty fast. Like, there was no real way for me to get out of this job. And I thought to myself, I'm going to be stuck here forever. I used to date a girl a long time ago, and her father worked in this meat factory for like 50 years. So that was kind of expected that I would do the same. Not many people left this small country town. Everyone pretty much ended up in the meat factory, and that's where you stayed forever. Inside of me, though, I always wanted to leave. I had a lot of resentment towards the people in the town, the place. No one ever thought I was going to do anything. So that really sort of used to fire me up a little bit. And but I struggled to think, how can I get out of here? And I started to save some money, because I thought to myself, well, what if I save enough money up that I can move away from the town, maybe go and do some extra education somewhere at a college, and pay for a course to be able to get me into something else. And that was where my first sort of thoughts came from, is I've got to make a change. I've got to do something different here. I'm going to be stuck here forever. So at this point in my life, I'm a pack-a-day smoker. I'm a heavy drinker, doing all the things that you shouldn't be doing, and, eating a lot as well. So I'm like 200, 250 pounds as well. And I decide to leave the job, and everyone says to me, you'll be back. You'll never make it outside of the small country town. And I got in that car and I drove out of there, and I never went back. And that was really the first sort of step of change, if you like. And a couple of years later, I met my wife. And that was the second sort of step of change. She put a lot of belief in me, a lot of love into me. And that was the really first time I'd felt any of those sort of emotions as well. So now I started to really believe in myself a little bit more. We fast forward this little bit of journey. We moved to the UK, and we're living in Manchester in England. And I'm over there making some friends. And I make friends with a guy called Dan, and it's his 30th birthday party. And we go to this event one night, and he's telling everyone at this party that he's going to go and run this half marathon race in just about 4 months' time. He'd run the race the year before. He'd done a time of 1 hour 50. He'd been training hard, and he wanted to beat that time from last year. So as he was telling everyone at the party, it's like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Everyone's listening in. Everyone's thinking Dan's a bit of a god because he could run 13.1 miles. I'm sort of listening to this, and I've had too many adult beverages, and I sort of start to think, well, maybe I could do this race too. And instead of just thinking it, it actually sort of blurts out of my mouth, oh, I think I could do this race too. And everyone listening to this story of Dan telling this, incredible feat of running half marathon looked at me and was like, there's no way you could run for a bus, let alone 13.1 miles. So everyone started to laugh. Everyone started to jeer and say, no way, there's no chance for you. And it kind of riled me up a little bit. I sort of thought, well, hang on a minute. I think I can do this, And some of that, of course, was the Dutch courage from the alcohol. But then I said, not only do I think I can do it, I'll give you 5 minutes head start, Dan. I'm going to take this on. You're pushing me too far now. And I wake up the next morning. I'd completely forgotten I'd made the bet with Dan that I could beat him at this half marathon race in about 4 months' time, and also beat him by 5 minutes head start that I'd given him. Now, we'd had a bet that whoever lost had to take the other couple out for dinner at an expensive restaurant where all the Manchester United soccer players go. So, I didn't want to have to be paying for this fancy meal. But I was also really sort of worked up by the fact everyone was sort of laughing at me, jeering at me, saying that I couldn't do it, when it was taking me back to that 13, 14, 15-year-old boy on the streets of that small country town in Australia. And it reminded me, actually, my grade 7 teacher. In Australia, when you finish grade 7, that's primary school, you then go off to high school in grade 8. So at the end of grade 7, you have like a final day parade, if you like. And my grade 7 teacher actually said to me the next place he thought he would see me would be in prison. So, those sort of little things always stuck with me. So when these people were laughing at me, I thought, right, I'm going to get up and see how far I can run. So my wife comes in, she tells me, I made this ridiculous bet. I've forgotten all about it. And then I remember everyone laughing. So I decide, okay, how far can I go? So I get up, put some clothes on. I wouldn't have even had running clothes, so I don't know what I wore, but I decided, right, I'm going to run around the block. And I get to the first corner of the block and I start to be out of breath. By the time I get to the second corner, I am out of breath. Get to the third corner and I'm literally like legs wobbling on my knees, trying to make it just back to the house. So I realized then, like, I was in terrible shape and let myself go completely with all of those sort of, drinking, food, cigarettes, drugs, everything that was coming into my life really to suppress what had happened to me when I was younger. So that was really the first change, using this as a momentum to try and prove these people wrong. So of course, from one block, I'd go to 1 mile, weeks later to 2 miles to 5 miles. And I'd trained and trained and trained. I'd lost a lot of weight. Dan would message me occasionally saying, oh, have you done any training for the race? It's just around the corner. And I'd tell him a few white lies. I'd be like, no, I'm still in the pub. I haven't done any training yet. Secretly, of course, I was training really hard. And if he put anything on social media saying how far he'd gone, by 6 or 8 to 10 weeks later, I was trying to do the same sort of distances, if not further than what he would do the next day. So
let me ask you this. How quickly did you notice your body getting in shape? Because I feel like that first run after not being active for a long time can really be, no pun intended, sobering, or a reality check. However, even a week in, you can see day by day pretty massive strides you're taking. Did you start to sense that yourself, that, okay, that was a tough experience, but I'm actually seeing progress really quickly?
Yeah, you're right. The progress does sort of happen very quickly, especially at the size I was, and the weight came off pretty quickly. So that's always the easy part. It's when you start to get a little bit fitter that you see the smaller gains and you think, why isn't it like it used to be?
Where you can just, knock off 10, 20 pounds. You're going from a half mile to a mile to 2 miles pretty quickly. You can double things really fast. But yeah, once you start, getting to a healthy place, it's incremental.
It is.
But it is very exciting once you start seeing. So were you successful in hitting some of those milestones that you were following your buddy along with? Like, okay, I'm going to go for that. Could you get there?
Yeah, and I really started to build the confidence then inside myself that I could really push him at the race. So we fast forward to the race, and I know I have to beat him by 5 minutes. And when the gun goes off, I go running as fast as I can. I'm pushing all throughout the 13.1 miles. And I finish in a time of 1 hour 28. I don't know what that means. Like, I'm like, I think it's like pretty decent because Dan had done 150 the year before, but I'm not sure. So I sit there basically at the finish line now, ticking down the 5 minutes extra that I had to give him. And the time goes by. I win the bet. I feel really good about myself. And I start to think about, wow, this is the first time in 20, 25 years that I'd felt good about myself for achieving something. And I felt good about the way I looked. And I sort of started to think, hey, maybe running was the right step for me to, go forward, not only physically, but mentally as well. That was really the first sort of moment of the journey. And, Dan always likes to take credit for taking that bet on and saying, hey, you wouldn't be the person you are today if you hadn't made that drunken bet with me. But that was a really big moment for me. It would lead then to me going to run a 155-mile race across the desert in South Africa just another 12 months later. And this is like a self-sufficiency race, a multi-stage race, 155 miles over 7 days, carrying your food and kit to survive the week as well. So I go out there with my wife, Lucia, and we run this race. And we've got all the gear, no idea. But we get through this really grueling, tough race a week later, and I finish in 6th position. And there's a lot of professional runners there. There's a lot of people there that have been in the sport a long time. And everyone's sort of looking at me like, who is this guy? Where's he come from? No one knows who I am. And here I have come 6th within this pretty full field of runners. So it's like, wow, maybe you could do even better, they would say to me, if you knew what you know now. You've completed a race, but also did some more training, put some more effort in. And that was really how it started, all through that one drunken bet, going to the Kalahari 155-mile race. And that would take me on a journey all around the world, running long-distance races, ultra marathons.
Wow. So what time, going back to that first half marathon, what time did your buddy eventually cross the finish line? How much time had you beat him by?
I think he'd got in around 140. So he was very happy as well to beat his own time, of course. Minutes. But he was disappointed, of course, to take me to that expensive restaurant as well. So.
Right. Okay. I bet it tasted great. That is, man, I love that because it's the unexpected can change. I mean, that changed your life that night at the bar. And, it set this trajectory in motion. And going all the way back to your childhood, I mean, was your situation a common situation in that town, in that area, as far as, being out on the street and trying to survive the way you were? Was that all around you, or were you unique in that sense?
I was very unique in that sense, but also I was very good at hiding what was going on. So I think what really was happening was people still thought I was at home, and that family life story was never completely told until much later, of course. So I would be living in, at one point I was living in a youth hostel. One point I was living in someone's shed. Another point I was actually living above a bar with a bunch of other people. So I was really just sort of moving, and people would have seen me. Like, I played a lot of sport when I was younger, and people would have, I think they would look back now and go, oh, that's why I was a very angry person, like as a very angry kid, very upset, like with the world. So when I played sport, I always had like that anger always just came out of me. Just like I was very good at the sport, but I also exploded at the smallest things. So I think people, when they read the book many years later that knew me from growing up, were like, now it all kind of makes sense as to what had happened. So that was tough, and a lot of people sort of reached out and were disappointed that they didn't help or didn't pick up on any of those things either. My grade 8 English teacher would read the book many years later, and she'd actually emailed me to say, hey, I'm really sorry I never picked up on any of those things. It all makes sense now. And she read the book. She said the English in the book was pretty good too. So
I didn't see that coming. I should have seen that coming. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's an English teacher, and I always say she speaks it real good in what I tell people. So that is a story in itself. Like that could have been your story, where you had this wild childhood and this growing up, and you decided to make a change one night. It was this drunken bet, which not always goes well, but this one did. And it leads you to running and then ultra running and these trips around the world. And you really explore the world through this new found passion and outlet and ability to kind of framework of life. And that's a great story. But there's an element to this that is so unique and so different with coming across this dog. Up to this point, what are some of those unexpected things you maybe had seen out on these trips? Of course, I'm sure so much has happened that is out of the ordinary. You know what I mean? Before you met Gobi.
Yeah, well, running the races that I do, sometimes I'm running across deserts, sometimes I'm running over mountains, sometimes I'm running through jungles for days and days and days. Yeah, I mean that's the situation. A lot of the times, even in some of these races, you're picking your own route as well. So it's taken me all around the world: Asia, Europe, America, all throughout Africa and Australia as well. Many different deserts, South America as well. So I've been really blessed to have lots of different adventures, meet lots of different people. But one of the funniest sort of things for me is like when I'm running out in the desert, and it could be in the middle of absolutely nowhere in the Sahara Desert in Morocco, and you'll just be running along and there'll be some random guy or family just looking at you, and they're probably thinking, what the heck are you doing running out here? Meanwhile, I'm thinking, what the heck are you doing living out here? Wow. It's probably the only live sporting event they get each year, is this one day a year when all these crazy runners come running through the desert. They come out to watch us all. But that's been the beauty of doing this sport, is being taken out to places that, you're not allowed to run in usually, or you can't run in unsupported. One of the races I've run is in the Ica Desert in Peru, and it was a week-long multi-stage race out there. And we were the first people to have ever been allowed to run a race out there. Subsequently, the race got cancelled after that event had finished, so it never was run again. And I believe we're the only people to have ever run out there in some of these most beautiful areas that are untouched around the world. So pretty incredible just to see where running can take you. It's a pretty simple sport. It can get pretty expensive doing some of these ultra marathons, but been really blessed to do that as well.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. Warmer, sunnier days are calling, and you can fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals, have fresh, never frozen meals that are smart, protein plus, even keto, diet friendly, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. And having a newborn in the house, any sort of time saving meal option is ideal. And every time we have kids, we do a meal prep service. And for our most recent child, we are choosing Factor meals. They have 30 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week to make your day delicious, from sun up with breakfast to sundowns and snacks and everything in between. There's all sorts of ways to customize it for whatever your dietary needs are. And if you want to try Factor meals, go to factormeals.com/ASP50 and use the code ASP50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. Again, that's code ASP50 at Factor Meals, FACTOR meals.com/ASP50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off next month while your subscription is active. A lot of y'all know I work for Athletic Brewing Company through my day job, and we use Shopify for our e-commerce platform. And Shopify is so helpful because even when we were a tiny little startup, just a couple employees, we were using Shopify. And now as we've grown to one of the biggest breweries in the country, well, we're still using Shopify. They make it so easy to grow. And I actually am recommending it to anybody starting a business, big or small. Definitely go with Shopify. I have a ton of firsthand experience with this global commerce platform, and it helps truly at every stage of the business. I've seen it firsthand. Whether you're auctioning off one-of-a-kind things like autographed apparel or sports memorabilia, baseball cards, or selling skis, like it really doesn't matter. They can help you at any stage of business and sell anywhere. I host a podcast through my day job, and we host the podcast and put it all on there on our blog on the website. It's great. We can put different surveys online, and there's all sorts of apps that go into it. It's really user-friendly and very robust. If you want to sign up for their $1 per month trial period, go to shopify.com/ASP, all lowercase. Shopify.com/ASP now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Again, that's shopify.com/ASP for Adventure Sports Podcast. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by, well, the state of Colorado. If you didn't know, this show was born and raised in Colorado. So many of our guests and stories take place there. So many of my adventures take place there. And we hope these episodes inspire you to seek an exciting trip of your own this summer in the beautiful state of Colorado. I was just there in Aspen, went hiking. It was absolutely breathtaking. And the mountains get a lot of attention, but there's culinary adventures, outdoor adventures, entertainment and scenic outdoor venues from music festivals and film festivals and all sorts of festivals. The state has it all. Experience the thrill of mountain biking along riverside trails or hop aboard a train for a railroad adventure. It has charming mountain and historic towns and cities, historic hotels, dude ranches, and like I said before, amazing cuisine, Michelin star level dining. And on those chilly summer nights, relax in one of the hot springs. Let Colorado awaken your spirit of adventure and explore all the possibilities that the state has to offer at visitcolorado.com and uncover the magic and start planning your getaway today. Visitcolorado.com. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. Like I was just saying, we've heard of the unexpected happening out there in situations you find yourself in, whether it be in a herd of wild horses or running into just villages or nomadic people and just seeing the unexpected. What happened with Gobi was another step further, something unexpected that would then change your life again. What happened there? What was that story? How did that unfold?
Well, in 2016, I went to run another multi-stage race across the Gobi Desert in China. Gobi Desert's fourth largest desert in the world. It's really unique desert because it has a big mountain range that runs through it called the Tian Shan, and it goes for hundreds of miles, the Tian Shan. Beautiful mountain range in the desert. It's like the Rocky Mountains in the middle of the desert, and snow leopards live up there. It's freezing cold at nighttime in the Gobi Desert. It's 120, 125 degrees during the day. So it's a stunning location, incredibly difficult location to run in because of the change of climate. You never really feel comfortable, freezing cold to baking hot. And the race that I would be running is, again, 155 miles, carrying food and kit to survive the week. And I start the race. I'm out there trying to win the race. And on day one, I get a good start, finish in third place, just a minute or so behind first and second. But the actions really happen further back. A little dog starts to follow two American runners up and over some sand dunes. She runs about 20 miles with them and finishes day one of the race. So around the campsite, people are really interested in what's happened. Where's this little dog come from? And they realize, well, she's kind of cute. They're looking at her, checking her out. I'm actually already sort of in the tents, and I don't sort of see a lot of this going on day one. So the next day, day two, I'm at the start line again, and I'm going through this sort of similar routine I do every day. Is like making sure my hat's on tight, my glasses are clean, the pack with all my food and kits all strapped up, ready to run. And I just happen to look down a little bit further, and I notice this dog chewing on my shoes. And we put these shoe covers on over our shoes to stop the sand from getting in, like a big sock, if you like. They're called gaiters. And when I look down, the dog's chewing on them. I see she's got sharp teeth, and I think to myself, well, she's going to put holes in them. Sand's going to get in there. So I kind of flick her off my foot. She jumps back on, starts chewing on them again. So I flick her off again. I'm like, scram, go away. She jumps back on, she starts chewing on them again. So now I'm getting really annoyed. The race is literally just about to start. So I call out, okay, whose dog is this? Someone come and get this dog away from me. And as I call out, though, the gun goes off to start the race. And all the runners go running down the trail ahead of me. And I'm stuck there with this pesky dog attached to my leg. So at first sort of thought of this dog is like, this is a little pest, She's somehow, though, thought this is the man for me forever. So we sort of had differing views on the relationship to begin with.
That's usually how it goes. And she's little too. I mean, this isn't like thankfully a massive dog. This is like a pest, like you said, very small.
Yeah, she's a little Chihuahua Shih Tzu mix. Just to sort of put it in perspective, she's a very, very small dog. And the dog looks up finally and sees all the runners running down the trail, and she sees everyone running. So she must think to herself, oh, we have to run again, do we? And she gets off my leg and starts to run. So, yeah, we run up and over the Tian Shan mountain range, snow-capped mountains. We run down the other side. And I'm running into the finish line on day 2, and everyone's cheering and clapping and playing some drums. And there's a lot of excitement. I think it's all for me. And as I sort of cross the finish line, the cheering, the clapping, the drum playing gets louder. So I'm like, what's all the excitement for? What's going on? And I turn around, and of course it's not for me. It's for the little dog running in behind me. So she'd run 25 miles on day 2. She'd already run about 20 miles on day 1. It was an incredible feat. Just after 2 days, she'd run, 45 miles of this stage race. And she came into the tent, collapsed down next to me. And I'm taking out some of my food from the pack that I've been carrying. And when we're out there, the food has to last in the heat of the desert. So it's not terribly exciting. It's like that freeze-dried camping food, nuts, granola bars. I like taking a lot of jerky with me. So I start to share a bit of jerky with the dog on day 2. So, yeah, it was an indifferent sort of start to the day. And here I was finishing with this dog. And I hadn't spoken to her the whole day. She'd stopped at 1 or 2 of the checkpoints, got some water off them, but just decided to keep following me from that moment onwards. It wasn't really until day 3, the next day, when we went through that same routine again at the start line. Like, she's chewing on my shoes, been a real pest. But when the gun goes off, she gets off my leg straight away, and I go running to the front of the field. And that's good, because I'm still in 3rd place. I'm still trying to win the race. I still can win the race. And I'm thinking, I don't want to let person second dictate things to me all week. I want to maybe try and make a move today. So I go running up to the front, 1st and 2nd ahead of me, pretty much all day on day 3. And it's super hot, like 125 plus, no breeze, no shade. It's ridiculous that we're running in this heat out there. And as I push throughout the day, I start to think maybe I'm not going to take the lead. 1st and 2nd, like, always ahead of me. I don't seem to be able to sort of close the gap down. And then in an instant, as I'm sort of thinking of this, I start to see them walking ahead of me. I'm like, is that a mirage in the distance? Are they slowing down? And they are. Maybe they've run out of water. Maybe they're struggling in the heat. This is my chance to go past them and take the lead of the race. As I get up closer to them, suddenly we drop down this big hill, and all I see is like a raging, rushing river ahead of me, about the size of a football field in length. We have to go down through this water. The finish line's a few miles away. The water's come from the snow up on top of the range. It's melted throughout the day. So I'm down now in the water. 1st and 2nd are just there. And I'm 6 foot something, and the water's up to my waist in height. Like, it's rushing really strong. It's freezing cold from the snow melt. And I'm pushing through it, 1st and 2nd, just there. I'm about to take the lead of the race. And then I hear barking, yelping, and whining behind me. And I remember looking at 1st and 2nd, I'm like, maybe they don't hear it. They keep going. I decide to keep going too, because I'm about to literally go past them. Then the barking, yelping, and whining gets louder, and it's like ringing in my ears. And I look at 1st and 2nd, but they're definitely not stopping. They don't care. I decide to stop, and I look back, and I see the dog running up and down the side of the water. And she knows, of course, if she goes into the water, it's rushing so fast, she's going to drown, she's going to die. So I'm left now thinking in the middle of the water crossing, like, what am I going to do? Do I go all the way back, pick the dog up, or do I take the lead of the race? And it's at this moment I find myself going back towards the dog. And it goes against like everything I'm out there to do. I'm out there to win the race. Nothing else matters. That's why I'm there. I'm getting sponsored at this point. So it's a big deal for me to be now going the wrong way back to get the dog. And as I go back through the water, I also now start to think, oh, I've got to pick this dog up. Like, she's not my dog. I haven't even touched her. I'd given her some jerky. That was it. So I was thinking, what if she doesn't like to be picked up? What if she tries to bite me? And being one of those small little dogs, you know, they can be pretty aggressive. So I'm now starting to think, oh, what if she's got rabies? All these thoughts are crossing through my mind. So I go all the way back through the water and I'm like, well, I got to pick her up. So I pick her up with my arm outstretched and try and go through the water with her out wide so she doesn't sort of bite me. But as I go through the water, she has this way of like nuzzling up into my arms, and I get all the way back through the crossing and I look back down, and now it's like I'm carrying a baby in my arms, and she's just staring at me with these big brown eyes that she has. And I sort of connect with her at this point is the moment when I start looking and thinking, wow, you know, what I've done is, as I mentioned, you know, completely against everything I'm there to do. Now I've got this animal in my arms. I'm looking at her and I'm like seeing a bit of myself in her. Like, nobody cares about this dog. We don't know what she's doing out there. She's chosen me out of all of these people. It's like, you know, maybe that was meant to be my moment to go back and pick this dog up. And I start to feel this sort of connection and bond with her that, you know, becomes unbreakable, and it becomes a life-changing moment. If I don't go back and pick the dog up, everything else that comes forward from that moment onwards doesn't happen either. So yeah, a really life-changing moment, this sort of one act of kindness, if you like, going back to help the dog.
What made you turn around? What made you say, you know what, sponsors are not going to love this. People aren't going to understand. I'm sure it hadn't been the first dog you'd seen out there on these races around the world.
For me, it was certainly the first occurrence of something like this happening. Usually, you know, of course you are in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, you might see some camels or in South Africa, I've run with giraffe, but yeah, nothing really that sort of follows you like a cute little dog. But I guess you're out in this environment for a whole week. You don't have any contact with the outside world. You're in your own head for a week of running, pushing yourself to the limits. And yeah, it's a physical battle, but it does become a mental battle as well with yourself. And I kind of wonder whether, you know, I'd been working really hard to keep up with first and second on those first couple of days, and now on day 3. And maybe it had sort of broken me down a little bit. Maybe it had made me sort of think, or maybe I didn't even believe in myself that I was going to win the race, that this was a point for me to do the right thing and go back and help the dog, and still then go on to try and pick up the race win. There's still 3 or 4 days, of course, left after day 3. So I don't really sort of have a full answer for you on that, but maybe there was something more happening in my mind than I really sort of think about. This was, of course, such a life-changing moment that I probably more think about what happened afterwards than my moments of going back. But it was in an instant as well, because I realized still I didn't want to waste the time doing it. So I went back as quickly as I could. First and second continued on, and yeah, I go back, pick her up, take her through the water, and we run all the way into the finish line together. So pretty unreal, because if I don't sort of do that, who knows what would have happened to her. Maybe another runner would have picked her up. Maybe she'd have done something silly, washed away. We just don't know. As we would go throughout the rest of the week, Gobi, as she would later be named, of course, after the desert she came from, would stick by me, would be there for the rest of the week, and I would finish the race with her in my arms at the end of day 7. So that was kind of an iconic picture and video of us finishing the race together that gets picked up in the press and goes, you know, virally throughout social media, the news, ABC, Fox, ESPN, Play of the Day, BBC, CNN, all of the big newspapers, USA Today, all coverage around the world. It was unbelievable. Just this story of Gobi and I running this race together was a pretty neat sort of first part to the story of finding Gobi.
What would you say is unique about Gobi compared to maybe other dogs you've had or other dogs that you see? Is there something? There's a unique combination of things like, well, one, her letting you hold her for that long and run with her, and also just the curiosity to follow along some strangers for so long. I don't know, what other things were you noticing in those first few days that was just different?
I think the thing that I've always sort of questioned is like, why did she choose me? What was it about me? There was 101 runners there. There's about 50 different people around the race as well, volunteers, organization, etc. And, Gobi would spend time with everyone out there at the race. Everyone's probably got their own little story of, when they met Gobi, and maybe they gave us some jerky too. But yeah, at the end of the day, she was always sort of back next to me. She'd always come with me. She'd always be running with me. And I see little bits of snippets of her running at one point in the race across this rocky outcrop. And it's got to be 120, 125 degrees, and she's running next to me. And it brings a bit of a tear to my eye, because it's like, why? What was she running from, or what was she running to as well? And as I mentioned, like, here's these two lost souls sort of brought together in the middle of nowhere in the Gobi Desert. And I can't kind of explain why I did the things that I did to help her. And, here I am as this fiercely determined, driven competitor trying to win. And they were all of the things that I guess can't really be explained. And maybe it's a bigger force is making those things happen as well. And maybe that was my one moment to change my life as well. And maybe these moments are put in each other's lives every day, and whether we take them or not, or whether we do these things, who knows? But yeah, I guess I'd love to ask Gobi, why did she choose me? What was it? And that answer would be pretty neat. But yeah, life-changing moment, and as we go throughout the rest of the week-long race, I start to think to myself, oh, I love this little dog, I just can't believe, like, the bond and connection was like straight away. It was instant. And once I, of course, let Gobi in, she knew from the moment she saw. Once I started to let her in, then that was it. We was thick as thieves. So I decided then that I want to bring Gobi home with me after the race. But at this point in my life, I'm living in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And I start to think, oh, how can I bring the dog home? So as soon as I finish the race, as soon as I get back to civilization, I ring my wife, Lucia, and say, hey, I met this dog in this race. And she'd already knew about it, because she'd seen some of the pictures on social media from the race that I'd had this little dog running next to me. So she'd actually already sort of started to think, I wonder if he's going to want to bring this dog home. So it was no surprise when I said to her, I want to bring her home with me. But that was the next sort of journey in the story, because she's not allowed to come home straight away. She needs to stay in China. She needs to have a blood test to make sure she doesn't have any diseases. And a rabies test takes about 90 days. So I can't stay for 90 days. I've got a job. I've got to go back to Scotland. So I fly home the next day, and Gobi stays in China. And that's really the first point of the story going around the world, getting picked up in the press that we'd finished the race, and now she was going to hopefully one day come to live with me in Scotland. So yeah, it was 5 minutes of fame. It was a great little bit of journey sharing the story of Gobi. Weeks and weeks and weeks go by, and then the person that was looking after Gobi in China for me, as we kind of were trying to work out how we were going to get her out of the country, the person looking after Gobi rings me and says, I'm really sorry, your dog Gobi's gone missing. I don't know where she is. I can't look for her. And she hung up the phone. So that was pure heartbreak, devastation. Gobi's now missing in a city of over 3 million people in northwest China, up near the Gobi Desert.
So what happened?
Well, I got on the next plane, flew all the way back to China, all the way back out to this big city called Urumqi in the Xinjiang province. And I get there. I don't know anyone, of course, can't speak Chinese language. When I get there, there's a lady waiting for me at the airport who's said she'll help. And we basically the lady and I, we set up a search and volunteer team trying to look for Gobi in this big city. And of course, she doesn't speak great English. I don't speak great Chinese. So it was incredibly difficult communication. So we started to get some translators. We started to get some other people involved in the search. The story had gone around the world, as I mentioned, in the press, including in China. So a very famous movie actor from China donated $10,000 reward. So we put up these posters saying, please help me, my dog Gobi's missing. If you find her, you get a reward of $10,000. So, of course, they're all in Chinese language. We're putting these posters up through the city. People then started to come and help. Slowly we had 3 people, then 5 people, then 20 people. Story gets picked up and goes all around the world again that Gobi's now gone missing. And people through China start to read about the story. So we soon have hundreds of people looking through the city. And we're looking everywhere, through the streets, through the parks, looking high, looking low, and phone starts ringing. Oh, I've just seen the dog running down the street here in this area. And we'd all go around to that area and start looking. And we get another phone call saying, oh, I've just seen her in a park in another side of town. We'd all go over to that side of town, still can't find her. Then the phone would ring and people would say, hey, I found your dog. Come round to the house. Don't forget to bring the money. We'd race around there and walk in. Of course, they don't have the dog. They're just trying to trick us for the money. So it started to take a long time. It started to get pretty depressing. The mafia became involved at one point. Because the story had taken off, we started to get threats from other people saying that they were going to actually take me hostage unless we paid them money. They knew where I was staying. They knew where we were and what areas we were searching, and something bad would happen to me. We'd get loads of threats of people saying, yeah, we've got the dog. We're going to kill it if you don't give us more money. I mean, the story just goes completely out of control at this point. And for weeks and weeks and weeks, she's missing. And we're just about ready to wrap up the search. And we receive a phone call from a man who'd been walking through a park with his son after dinner. And this little dog started to follow them. And they'd seen all the posters. They knew about this dog. And they were like, hey, that kind of looks like the dog everyone's looking for. So they take it home and they ring and they say, hey, we think we found your dog. Come round to the house. And at this point, I'm really skeptical. I'm over being there. I'm over the search. And I'm like, it's not going to be her. This is a waste of time. But some people around the search say to me, hey, we should go and see for ourselves. Like, what if it is her, right? So I'm sort of forced into the car. We drive over the other side of town, like 45 minutes an hour away. We get there and we walk into the family's home. And I'm like, this is a waste of time. I walk behind translator, search and volunteer team. And as I walk in over the other side of the room, I see this little brown dog and she sees me. And I still haven't said anything, but straight away when we lock eyes, she starts barking, yelping and whining like she did on the water crossing that day. And she comes running towards me, jumps up in my arms. Gobi had been found. And it was an incredible moment. Like, I'm in tears. Everyone else is in tears. Hundreds of people came together. Like, they didn't know me. They'd never seen Gobi before, just searching day and night, looking for the dog. And it was an incredible act of generosity and kindness and human spirit for everyone to come together to search for this little dog. And it was a miracle, really was. In this, 3.5 million people city. I mean, incredibly difficult against all the odds. We found her, and that was an incredible day. Probably one of the best days of my life was, finding Gobi for the second time.
So there was no separation after that. What was that process of getting Gobi home with you? Challenging, I know.
It was, because she'd also been hit by a car while she was missing. So she needed an urgent operation on the leg or she'd lose the leg forever. So that was difficult. We had to, Urumqi in northwest China, to get Gobi from Urumqi to Beijing was a challenge in itself, because you can't transport animals on airplanes in China. So you can't take them on the plane, you can't put them in the cargo. It's really difficult to get animals shipped around without the paperwork and without the medical requirements, which of course she still didn't have. She's a stray dog. None of this had been organized as we thought was happening. So it was like, how are we going to get her from Urumqi to Beijing? It's like, 24-hour drive. That would be one way to do it. But if you drove that way, you'd probably get stopped along the way at checkpoints, police checkpoints. You'd be asked, what are you doing out here? Someone would probably ask about the dog, and you'd have no paperwork. So we were very lucky that someone who became involved with the search and volunteer team actually knew some people at Air China, and they agreed to put Gobi in the cargo, basically as a hidden piece of luggage without any record. And we got flown together on the same plane to Beijing, and we got her down there as quickly as we could to get that leg operation done. Saved a leg, got the blood work done, but had to wait like 3 to 4 months for the blood work to be approved and also the leg to be fixed, or recover. So yeah, I got to hang out in Beijing for a little while. A lot more sort of still happens, still a few threats, still a bit going on around Gobi. And it was a good day. The day we got on the plane to travel all the way back to Scotland was like 6 months later when we finally arrived back in Scotland to fanfare down the streets of where we own a place in Edinburgh. And the news was there, the press was there, media was there, fans wanting to see Gobi for the first time ever. So that was the start of the next part of our sort of life together, if you like.
How were you able to do this with your personal life and with just your regular life? What went into, what allowed this opportunity, or what did you sacrifice?
Yeah, something that probably gets lost in telling the story is you're right, is that there's a lot of personal sacrifice. There's a lot of sacrifice from my wife, Lucia, as well. Going through this whole period, being separated. I obviously had a job at the time, I mentioned that earlier, and had to speak to my employers on numerous occasions to say, hey, I need to fly back and search for the dog. And then when we found the dog, I'm like, hey, would you mind giving me a sabbatical, because I can't come home without the dog. There's still too much at risk. And I worked for William Grant and Sons, they make Glenfiddich and Balvenie whiskey, and I worked for them for about 11 years, family-owned business, and they were super supportive of my journey, still are to this day. And without the support of all of these people, the people that came from all around the world to donate money towards the search and volunteer team, and then also towards sending me back on a plane to search for her, and having the money sort of raised to be able to bring Gobi home is all very expensive as well. Took a lot of people coming together to make it happen, and something that we're always forever grateful for. But it was tough. It was a tough journey. It was great experience, but it was sort of tough on other different levels personally as well. I was very happy to get home to Scotland after those 6 months had passed as well.
What can you tell people about what you learned through this process, who might be saying to themselves, my work will never allow me to do something that's important to me, or maybe my spouse or my friends or my family would never, I'm just not going to even ask. That would just be too much. Maybe it's something they feel strongly about. Maybe it's not a lost dog in a middle of a 3 million person Chinese city. Maybe it's something else that's important to them. What would you say to folks that have a big dream or a big goal, but are maybe afraid to ask?
Yeah, I guess, it's breaking it down. And that's usually the biggest thing. How do you eat an elephant? One small bite at a time. So that's with anything in life, is I guess breaking down those goals, and probably breaking down the way to be able to discuss it and explain it, and bring people in on the journey as well. I think is really important, which is something that I was probably better at than what I would have thought initially, was actually asking for help, asking for advice. One of the things Lucia always, used to say to me was, was never very good at doing that, right? Always, because of that childhood, very closed. No one was there for me. No one's there for me going forward. But you've got to open up. You've got to let people into your life. You've got to share with them. You've got to trust in people as well. And, with the story with Gobi, that was more than evident. Being in a different country with different people, different languages, different culture, you got to put trust in people, and you've got to believe that they're there for the right reasons too. And I think, in our lives in general, that's probably a day-to-day thing. but you can have amazing relationships and experiences with people when you do learn to trust and to give to people as well. So that's probably the biggest thing I've learned about myself is being more open and loving and caring and sharing as well. So that's been a difficult journey. I'm now nearly 50, and it's probably taken me 40 odd years of my life to get to that point as well. So, Gobi's brought a lot of those things out in my personal experience as well. And writing a book is also another factor of that. If I hadn't written the Finding Gobi book, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go back to those earliest thoughts and just to write them down and to think about them and to process them in a little bit more of a different way. And sometimes I actually tell people it's not a bad journey just to sort of write a 3, 5, 10-page sort of life diary, if you like, and start to think about those things. Because throughout my process, I wrote Finding Gobi, and it took like 13, 14 different drafts before it got published. And I had a really tight timeline of the book being published in, because it was in the news, it was in the press. The publishers wanted to sort of jump on that as well. So I had to work really hard getting these thoughts down. And then my first draft's really angry with the world and really upset because I'm still, thinking of all of those things that happened to me. 13, 14 drafts later, the book as it is today, it touches on some of those things, but it's not as important to share those things. And I've moved on from a lot of those things throughout the time and the process of writing the book as well. So I think we learn the more we get to share. And, as I said, the book was a big process for me in being able to change a lot about myself as well.
This is obviously, and I've mentioned it a few times, a book or a story of the unexpected. Where's one of the most unexpected places that Gobi has taken you, or this story has taken you since coming out in the form of a book? It might be meeting somebody you never thought you would, or a situation you never thought you'd find yourself in by picking up that dog to cross that river.
Well, the journey's taken us, I think, 13, 14 different countries now, 34 states, as I mentioned. We've been very lucky to be invited, I guess, to meet the royal family. That was pretty neat. Got to hang out with Queen and got to give awards with Prince Edward, her son, to Children of the Future in the UK. They go through a process there of Duke of Edinburgh Awards, and it's something that takes a year, 2 years to complete. And being there with Prince Edward, handing out these awards with Gobi next to me was an amazing sort of moment for me. Here I am now sort of encouraging youth of the future to go on and achieve great things in their life when, 13 years, 14 years of age boy that I was, had none of that hope for myself. So I'd kind of done this big 360, and now I'm with the royal family handing out awards. I mean, that's the sort of journey of life, I think. And, Gobi's story in itself, from Gobi's point of view, like, it's helped raise money, awareness for other animals in need. We get emails and messages from people that have heard the story, read the story, picked up on, Gobi being a stray dog, and they've gone down to their local rescue shelter and donated money or blankets or food, or even taken a dog home. And I think to myself, well, that's pretty neat. If we can help one dog, if we can help one person. I've had lots of different people come up to me that have read the book and said, I so connected with your backstory, where you've come through in life. I might have had, they might have had their own difficult journey. Everyone's had their own difficult journey in life. They've connected with me and brought a bit of hope, whether that's making a change in fitness or making a change in their life, or maybe they're not happy in their relationships or with what's happened at work, and they want to make some of those moves or changes. And no matter how small they are, I guess, my story's maybe given them some bit of hope that they can make those changes and do the things that they maybe thought were impossible as well. So, when I get those sort of emails, those things really touch me more than maybe meeting someone super famous. I remember I was in Slovenia and I was doing a book release there, and we actually we're at a 10-kilometer race the next day after doing this book release, and there was like 5 or 6 of these guys that had read the book, and they'd come up to me to say how they were inspired to be running this 10-kilometer race. They were all part of a drug rehabilitation program, and they were using the book as a bit of a reason to pick up on changing. They were already down that journey, but also the book was giving this inspiration to now want to go out and run 10 kilometers. So they'd been training for this race for like 3 months. The book had been out in Slovenia for like 6 months. I then went with the race to do a promotion around the book as well. And here they were using the book as the tool to get them to the start line of this 10-kilometer race all throughout my own story. And of course, they'd had incredibly difficult lives and experiences as well, yet they were connected with it. So, there's a cute dog on the cover of the story. Of course, she's the star of the show. She's the cute, good-looking one, but there's a lot more to the story than just a man running with a dog out in the desert. And I think that's the beauty of the story and why it's so incredibly popular.
What is something that you want people to know and understand about Gobi as a dog? Maybe what Gobi's up to these days, or something else you've learned from her, or just maybe a misconception.
Well, Gobi's still living the dream, loving life.
Yeah, I think she's got a pretty good life.
June 20 was her 10th birthday. Excuse me.
That's my birthday.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Well, happy birthday. That was just recently. That was the day we met in the Gobi Desert on day 2 of the race. So that was, of course, the day we decided that was going to be her day. And she's just such a great dog. We have a picture book and a chapter book as well, which is very popular for children across the world. And in the US, we do lots of speaking events, from schools to libraries to corporate events, with the main edition book. But we get to go to a lot of schools, and I get to take Gobi with me, and she brings a smile to so many kids' faces. And she has this amazing story, but also it's a story of being kind. The moment I go back to pick Gobi up, if I'm sharing this story at a school, I then ask the kids, hey, what would you do? Would you take the lead of the race, or would you go back and pick the dog up? And 99% of the kids want to go back and help the dog. And when I ask them that, though, that's their moment to work out the answer for themselves, right? And I don't think there's no right or wrong answer. If someone says, hey, I will take the lead of the race, I leave them with that. That's their choice. I don't, say, oh, that's wrong. But as I say, 99% of the kids will say, oh, I'd go back and pick the dog up. Then I say to them, well, why would you pick the dog up? What's the reasoning? And, it's friendship, kindness, looking after a loved one or loving animal or living animal. Or it might be just that she's cute and, hey, I'm going to get a free dog out of it is one of the other answers I get from kids. But that for me is also part of Gobi's sort of legacy is, all the great things that we do for animal rescue shelters through Gobi's story, but also sharing the story with kids to be able to get them to sort of think about being kind to others, being kind to animals, also sharing that you never know where life can take you. Now, if I'm in an elementary school, I don't share the story of my childhood with those kids at that age, but we do high schools, middle schools, and some of these kids are sitting there, potentially in the same situation as I am, perhaps not completely happy with life and not knowing where their life's going to take them. So I share a little bit more of the story with them at that age level to say, hey, I didn't know as a 13-year-old boy on the streets of that small country town, I'd be a New York Times bestselling author. I'd go and meet the Queen and other famous people and have this journey. And that for me is like the really beautiful part of sharing the story and wanting to get out there and to do that, because if you can give people that hope, I think that changes everything. And one act of kindness changes my life, going back to pick the dog up. And we wouldn't be talking today if I hadn't gone and done that.
I'm excited to see where the journey continues to go. What would you say is next for you and Gobi? Any big races, any big life events coming up, or is it just kind of enjoying this life that you have together?
definitely enjoying life together. I get to spend every day with Gobi, so I'm hanging out with my best friend and my wife too. So that's pretty neat. I did just run a 100-kilometer race in the Denali National Park up here just last week, which was my first race in over 3 years. The last race that I had done in 2021 was the iconic Badwater race in Death Valley, California. And for sort of 3 years, I thought I was happy having run all of the iconic races that I wanted to run. And maybe that was my running journey. So I'd been having lots of different adventures with Gobi. But then, I got back into running, and I did the 100-kilometer race last week, as I mentioned. And then that was actually a qualifying race for me to be able to go and run a 250-mile nonstop race across the Gobi Desert in China. So the race is called the Ultra Gobi 400-kilometer. And it was held many, many years ago. It hasn't been on for about 5 or 6 years now. And this is the first year back, and I've excited to be going back to the Gobi Desert to run across, where some of this story had happened, of course, many years ago in 2016 with Gobi the dog. So she won't be joining me, but I'll definitely have her inside of me and a bit of spirit there as well to be able to go out there and run that. So that's pretty neat. We're up in Alaska, as you know. We're back down through Canada doing some speaking events, and then back down on the West Coast for most of the rest of 24 and into early 25, doing those schools and libraries and corporate events as well. So the journey continues, and having fun doing it, and enjoying every minute, as I said.
Awesome. Well, Dion, we're going to point people to find the book. I hear there's a film in the works too, potentially. Is there anything you can update us on that, or is that kind of...
That's still a work in progress. We've had a bit of a journey with the film along the way. So we've had a couple of opportunities that maybe haven't really worked out for us. So we're still working on that at the moment, and still looking to bring that. It's definitely going to happen at some point. So that'll be really the icing on the cake, would be to walk down the red carpet with Gobi and and see the story come to the big screen, and just think, wow, this kid from nowhere and this dog from nowhere, and just where life can take you, I think would be pretty special. Share that with Gobi.
Well, Dion, thank you so much for coming on and telling us some of this story. It's we're going to encourage people to find the book, and we'll also do a giveaway. So we'll anytime we have an author on and there's a book associated, we'll do a giveaway to our listeners. So I'll be purchasing a copy, especially for that too. So thank you for making the time on your trip.
Thanks so much, and appreciate it, and hope everyone enjoyed listening to the story as well.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to growing the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.